Welcome everybody to this meeting of Eastern Planning. Me and my little echo. Okay. Oh, I've lost the echo. That's good. So apologies for the slight delay due to technical hitches. My name is Penny Rivers and I chair this committee. Please keep your statements brief and to the point. We have 2 questions this evening from members of the public and 1 question from Councillor Higgin, and we have 2 public speakers. So let's come to number 1 on our agenda, which is apologies for absence. Leila, are there any?
Yep, I've received apologies from Councillor Goodridge and Councillor Gale.
Thank you. And minutes of the last meeting. Do you agree the minutes of the last meeting? Agreed. Thank you. Declarations of interest. Leila, are there any?
None received.
Thank you. So we come to questions by members of the public. And our first question this evening is from Isabel House. And I'm going to read the question and the Chief Planning Officer is going to respond. So the question is in 2 parts. What is the evidence that the portfolio holder for planning and the interim planning policy holder have to support their views expressed in the review of Local Plan Part 1 report dated December 2022 that Policy SS6, which relates to land opposite Milford Golf Course, designated as a strategic site, does not need to be reviewed. The landowner is applying to the Lands Tribunal to remove the restrictive covenant which affects that site, and although the site will not deliver homes in the next 5 years, it will deliver the designated homes later in the plan period. What is the legal analysis that legal services did which satisfied them that the report containing these statements and opinions could be agreed and signed off on the 21st of December 2022 before it was submitted to the Oversight and Scrutiny and Services Committee on the 24th of January 2023 and the Executive on the 7th of February 2023? Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Land opposite Milford Golf Course was allocated as a site for housing development by Local Plan Part 1, Policy SS6. The developability of the site has been discussed more recently during the examination of Local Plan Part 2. This has been in the context of whether additional housing allocations are required in Milford and Whitley. The Council's evidence has included a statement of common ground with the site promoter Stretton Milford Limited and legal advice in relation to the covenant. All evidence is available on the examination website. Third parties, including Mr. House, have made representations on these matters, and these are presently with the inspector for his consideration. The examination is ongoing, and until the inspector's report is received, the Council's position remains that the allocated site is developable within the plan period to 2032. The review of Local Plan Part 1 policies reported to the Council on 21st of February gives an initial indication of whether policies require updating. In relation to policy SS6, it recognises that a covenant exists and that this would need to be overcome before the consented development could be implemented. It sets out the Council's understanding that the landowner is applying to the Lands Tribunal to remove the covenant. On this basis, the initial indication is that policy SS6 does not require updating. However, the covering report at paragraph 5.5 identified delays in the delivery of key allocations, including land opposite Milford Golf, as an indication that the plan requires updating. The Council has agreed that an update of Local Plan Part 1 should be undertaken, and a scope and timetable will now be prepared. The update of the plan will be the opportunity to gather additional evidence to assess housing requirements and sources of supply across the borough. This will include consideration of progress or lack of progress in delivering allocated sites, and third parties will be able to make representations during the plan making process. The initial indication of whether a policy needs updating does not therefore prejudge the council's position when it is updating the plan. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much. And we come now to our second question. So if Mr. Hyman would like to come and ask the question, that would be wonderful. Thank you.
Good evening. This question concerns the council's application of its policy, Waverley Borough Local Plan 2002, brackets, retained policies February 2018. It's policy D4, paragraph H. Policy D4, design and layout. The council will seek to ensure that development is of a high quality design which integrates well with the site and complements its surroundings. In particular, the development should provide safe access for pedestrians. Repeat that. In particular, the development should provide safe access for pedestrians and road users, and where appropriate, servicing facilities and parking for motor vehicles and bicycles. The council also has a policy that any new flat requires a parking space with an electric vehicle charging point. My question, when these two policies are in conflict with each other, especially when the safety of pedestrians is being challenged by the parking space policy, which should take priority?
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you. Apologies, I have my back to you as well, so with trying to reach the microphone. In accordance with the relevant development plan policies and guidance, the transport impact of a proposed development is assessed to ensure the safety of all users of the highway. The impact of a proposed development is judged on a case-by-case basis, and the advice of the County Highway Authority is sought where necessary. This can include advice on the provision of parking spaces and electric vehicle charging bays or points to ensure that the necessary bays and services can be provided whilst maintaining safety. If the proposed development is likely to compromise the safety of road users, this would fail to accord with development plan policy. Where the Highway Authority is satisfied that the proposed development will not cause harm to road users, planning conditions may be recommended and imposed to ensure that the development can be carried out whilst ensuring the safety of all users is maintained upon implementation. The provision of electric vehicle charging points for properties is now required by building regulations, and the guidance relating to the installation of these points is provided in the relevant approved document S. Thank you.
Thank you very much. So we now come to our questions by members of agenda item number 5, and we have some questions from Councillor Higgin.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. Over the past 2 weeks, I've been notified about 7 telecommunications cabinets that Virgin Media wish to install in my ward. Each of them's a separate notification, and each of them's been allocated to a different officer. Yet 3 of them are in the same road, not more than 100 yards apart, yet they still have a different officer. Whilst I've commented directly to the assigned officers regarding specific concerns about some of these notifications, I have some more general concerns. So the first question is, whilst individually such cabinets may not be a concern, cumulatively they have the potential to become quite detrimental to the street scene and general amenity of the area. Is there any limit on the number of companies that can install these cabinets and the density that can be permitted in any one area? So that's the first question. The second question is, what's the purpose of these notifications and how much scope do we actually have to object outright or insist on alternative locations? Because the covering letter I received as a ward councillor really doesn't have sufficient detail on what I'm being asked to look at and what way forward we can go with that. Thirdly, how many of these notifications have we received across Waverley so far this year, given that I have 7 in my ward? And then finally, can the allocation of this work please be controlled so that a single officer can be tasked with considering the cumulative impact of such applications rather than just each being an individual issue. That were my 4 questions. Thank you.
Thank you, councillor Hegan. Beth, you're going to reply.
Yes, thank you, Chair. Thank you, councillor Hegan. So in response to your questions, and please do let me know if there is anything that I haven't picked up. Regulation 5 of the Electronic Communications Code Regulations 2003 as amended requires a code operator, so one of these companies, to give written notice to the planning authority where it intends to install apparatus other than lines in an area where it's not previously installed apparatus, or to install a cabinet, box, pillar, pedestal or similar apparatus for which planning permission is not required. There are exceptions concerning other types of apparatus installed inside a building other than a permanent structure, for example. Under Regulation 5.3 of the under Regulation 5.3 of the Electronic Communications Code Regulations, the planning authority may within 1 month give the code operator written notice of conditions with which it wishes the code operator to comply in respect of the installation. However, the code operator is not obliged to comply with those conditions to the extent that they are unreasonable in all the circumstances. Now, this provision exists so that if people ask the local planning authorities and councillors about information as to these installations, they can be properly informed, especially when people are wondering what's happening, if they're querying the legality of what's being undertaken. And it also gives the local planning authority the opportunity to correct a code operator who's proceeding on the mistaken understanding that the development is permitted by a general permitted development order. So put simply, no, there isn't a limit. The regulations and the permitted development order in combination don't give a limit. There isn't a density maximum. In terms of whether or not you can object or outright or insist on alternative locations, we welcome your comments. We will always feed them back to the code operators. But what they do with those comments is not within our jurisdiction to control. In turning to your 3rd question, how many notifications we've received so far this year? We've received 92 across the borough. And in terms of your request that a single officer be tasked with dealing with the cumulative impacts in a single ward, completely take your point, but allocations are determined on an officer capacity basis, but I wish to assure you that they are overseen by 2 or 3 development leads, so that there is an oversight to what is going on in that local area. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Councillor Cossey, you want to say something?
A comment, because I think it adds to what Councillor Hegan said. I also have had something like 4 to 5 of these notifications within the last week or so. I think, as far as I'm aware, they are connected with the cabling that's going on. And I understand the need for that, but I would like to say something about the process here, because I've certainly had at least one of them, which was sent to me by the planning technicians or whoever sends this out, and there was a clear instruction to me to send, I think by tomorrow or something, any thoughts I'd got direct to the operator and just to copy people in. There was no assigned planning officer, and I think I would just ask that someone, maybe you, Beth, or whoever you think appropriate, actually just takes a bit of an overview of this, because I don't think they are being handled consistently in a way that gives us an opportunity to talk, you know, in a coherent way about the impacts on our wards. I mean, I would like to talk about, for example, you know, what impact, how much discretion we have over the colour of the cabinets and the size. Probably not so much on the size, but things that can be quite important depending on the context. But the stuff we have got is not helping us, unlike most of the stuff we get from you, to help us understand what we can do, what the time limits are, and who we should communicate with. So I just really wanted to add to what Councillor Hegan's been saying. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Costa. I'm sure Beth has taken all that on board. Thank you. So now we come to our applications. Oh, I beg your pardon, Councillor Ellis.
Thank you. I did think that you'd see me indicated I want to speak. It's actually, I'm not sure of the procedure, but could I refer back to a question from a member of the public that was answered regarding the possible conflict between pedestrian safety and EV chargers? I understand what the officer said, but it may be relevant to one of our applications that we will be looking at, that the pedestrian walkway and the roadway and the EV chargers are all on private land. And I wondered how that would change perhaps your answer. Thank you.
Would you like to add anything further? Okay, should we wait? We'll wait. Okay, thank you very much, Councillor Ellis. So now we'll come to the planning applications. And the first one in front of us this evening is WA 2022 02031 2 Old School, Furzon Lane, Ellens Green, Horsham. And Susie, you're going to present it for us. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. This application has been brought before the Area Committee at the request of local ward member Councillor Denis to allow the impact upon residential amenity to be debated by the committee. 19 letters of objection from 11 addresses have been received. The application proposes the erection of 2 single-storey extensions to the rear of the existing dwelling at 2 Old School, as well as a front porch. So the application site is outlined in red, and it's to the north of Furzon Lane. The block plan shows 2 Old School in relation to number 3 and the Old School. The left photo shows the rear of number 2 on the right top, the left-hand picture. And on the right top photo is taken from neighbouring property number 3. The bottom right photo is taken from neighbouring property, the Old School. So these proposals show the existing and the proposed rear elevation. The side elevation as taken from adjoined property number 3 and from the Old School, and the existing and proposed plans. So the proposed plan shows the rear extension located to the north of the property. The agent has shown the 45-degree horizontal analysis rule from neighbouring properties, so the proposal will not cross the line. So the main matters for consideration are impact on residential amenity, impact on character of the dwelling, and the officer recommendation is permission be granted subject to conditions. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much. And now we have 2 speakers. You have 4 minutes each. The first speaker is Mr. Harding, and you're speaking to object.
Tonight, you're being asked to consider a planning application at 2 Schoolhouse, the middle of 3 terrace properties, once the single entity of the village school, creating a compact setting where proximity and impact are amplified. In order to allow full evaluation, I suggest it's not unreasonable to have access to complete, accurate drawings that are fully dimensioned. Currently, it is by no means clear what is what, and we don't believe that the planning officer's report addresses all the matters raised. The process to date has been as follows: an application with drawings, a set of 19 letters of objection, a new set of plans, a new set of objections, an applicant rebuttal introducing previously unseen dimensions, a set of objections to the rebuttal, a planning officer's report with new information. As you can imagine, this is very confusing when all we sought was a set of drawings that accurately reflect the proposal and relevant neighbouring features. I'll now take you through the points which we believe remain unresolved, unclear, contradictory and confusing against the plans in the officer's report. With reference to the front porch, the rainwater is confirmed to discharge across the boundary. I believe the minimal impact statement to be disingenuous given the amount of rainwater that has hit this front south-facing wall recently. This unneighbourly discharge is close to underfloor ventilation with potential for shallow foundation issues and damp ingress. The porch cannot discharge into the property, and solutions have previously been offered. On the main proposal, clear encroachments are presented at the boundary between 1 and 2 and confirmed within the proposed plan and elevation. Despite continuously raised, these encroachments have not been addressed by the officer's report. There can be no encroachment of the boundary for either the structure or excavations. Dimensions given by the planning officer presents 2 builds with no overall length dimension stated. Previous dimensions have referred to 5.24 metres and 5.4 metres, excluding the portico. So how long is the development? The kitchen roof height quoted on the drawing is 2.7 metres. The applicant rebuttal introduced 2.8 metres, and the planning officer quotes 2.8 metres in a proposal and 2.7 metres reference to old schoolhouse, so which is correct? The planning officer's quoted measurements are different in size versus the drawing, so which version is now correct? The proposal is quoted as not crossing the 45-degree horizontal analysis. I think it does. The reference point to confirm this despite requests has never been provided. The de facto side window set at 45 degrees facing north and east and being on the boundary creates an overbearing view across number 1's garden. The officer's justification that there will be no loss of privacy or additional overlooking is incorrect. There are mitigation options. There will be light pollution from the roof lantern, which must be viewed in the context of the proximity of properties versus a likely reference detached property. The access to the site is solely over land owned by Waverley Council with parking only for 6 bungalow tenants with right of way only for number 2 and number 3 schoolhouse, access from the highway under low hanging power cables. Delivery, concrete, muck away, skip lorries will block this access and egress. A CTMP is most definitely required for residents to have unimpeded access at all times. Also, a schedule of conditions survey of this access will be required before any work starts to protect all parties. It is in everyone's interest, and indeed for their protection, that there is clear and accurate agreed proposal confirming all construction details and its containment within the curtilage of number 2 on both sides as a minimum. On the basis of the above and against the presented points, we would ask you to defer your decision until all these points have been satisfactorily resolved. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And the next speaker is Mr. Del Vecchio, speaking in support.
Thank you. Thank you, Chair, and thank you, members, for considering our application and allow me to speak today on behalf of the applicants, Mr. and Mrs. Taylor. The family has sought to work proactively with the council on this scheme, addressing the collective objections of the residents of Furzin Lane and Newhurst Parish Council. They are committed to improving their property and enhancing its visual amenity. There is no overdevelopment of the site, and the proposal seeks to preserve the structural integrity of the building. The proposal constitutes a minor single-story rear extension and a front open porch. With regard to the objections, it is noted that concerns raised by third parties and Newhurst Parish Council have been addressed throughout the course of the application. The main concerns relate to character, residential amenity, and highway impacts. In terms of character, significantly, the old schoolhouse is not a listed building. Although it is highlighted that the building has special character, it has been subject to substantial alteration over time, beginning with the conversion into the 3 terraced dwellings currently in situ. The site is within a conservation area where specific character features may be more distinctive. The brief mention of the old schoolhouse within policy EEG3 is only indicative of the historical significance of the area, which is not comparable to a listed designation. The front facade has changed over time from the original brickwork as it has been rendered, pebble dashed and painted. These alterations, which have been made to the front of the building, are more of a reflection of the character of the area than the proposed single-story rear extension, which will not be visible from the street scene. If necessary, materials can be conditioned in accordance with what the council deems to be acceptable. In terms of amenity, the extension would be built out of necessity and functionality, improving upon internal amenity space for present and future occupiers. The existing dwelling has restricted habitable rooms, which do not effectively mitigate noise and the impacted privacy. The updated plans have included neighboring windows and highlight the discrepancy in the objections, where measurements provided by number 3 were inaccurate. The amended drawings demonstrate that the end wall of the extension is angled away from the boundary at a 45-degree angle. There is a minimal loss of light as a result. Concerns raised about overlooking are into non-habitable rooms. That is a closed kitchen at number 1, which doesn't meet the definition of habitable room in the design SPD, which only covers large open plan kitchens. Concerns have been raised that site operatives will result in strain on Fridson Lane during building works. This is a temporary impact, and the small scale of the development will not warrant a high number of vehicles being needed. A construction management plan can be submitted to reassure residents that the road will not become congested. It is considered that the proposal is in full accordance with local and national planning policy in all regards. It is therefore respectfully requested that councillors determine to reach this conclusion and approve this application. Many thanks for your time.
Thank you very much. So committee members, it's your time. Councillor Denis.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Ellen's Green sits in sort of the far end of my ward, at least for the next 2 months anyway. I'm quite concerned. I'd actually like to see some of the questions or the concerns. I think it was Mr. Harding that put. I wonder whether Susie could go through them, because there was discrepancies in drawings. Well, there's a long list, and I think I'd want to be absolutely sure how accurate the information we're given is tonight. So could I defer back to Susie, please, Madam Chair?
Certainly.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Councillor Denis. The measurements I've taken are from the drawings. The drawings don't need to be fully annotated. They've got a scale bar on, and I've taken on our computer system, I've taken the measurements from those drawings. Is that what you're asking?
That was one of them. I can't say that totally convinced me, actually, if I'm honest.
Okay. Oh, I see. Sorry. So there are 2 elements to the application. There's the larger rear extension, which is 2.7 meters in height, I believe. Sorry, 2.8 meters in height, and the smaller, which is 2.7 meters in height. So they butt up to each other.
Okay, well, I'm still not entirely. If I could get a really good signal, I'd probably have another look at the plans online. And what about the issues of the rainwater going towards the other properties, which obviously would make it very damp and could potentially make a problem for those houses?
The issue of rainwater runoff from roofs is actually not a matter that can be picked up in the planning process. It's a matter between 2 private parties. So it's not something that we've been able to factor into our assessment. Thank you.
Okay, I'll leave your answers as that for the time being. If I can just go through just a couple of minutes, and I'm sure my colleagues will go. I mean, my view is a 2-story extension is inappropriate for this location. Sorry, but there's 2 single stories. I think is overbearing for that location. I think the impact on the neighbouring properties, I think is a consideration. I mean, if you look at what the Ewhurst Parish Council's comments were, and I think these are very relevant, there is going to be a loss of light and amenity for the immediate neighbours. I think it is out of character. It was mentioned this is a conservation area. Is that correct or not? Because that's actually the applicant who said that. Okay, I thought I hadn't read it in the papers. This is countryside beyond the green belt. I just think this is a stage too far. You know, you've got the 3 properties, and this one is going to extend out. I do think it's going to have an impact on the neighbours. I mean, as you know, policy RE1, it says the intrinsic character and beauty of the countryside will be recognised and safeguarded. And where appropriate, should enhance the character of the landscape. I'm not really sure it does that at all. High quality design. Well, I know design's always a subjective view, but and then we've got the Ewhurst and Ellen's Green Neighbourhood Plan. So that'd be policies ECG3 and ECG4, which I'm not sure this is actually complements. I think it contradicts those 2 plans. I think page 14, you said proposed development would not result in harm to the residential amenity of the neighbouring properties. My personal view is I don't agree. I think it does. So, I mean, obviously I'm going to be interested in what my colleagues say. I know there's a dispute on the 45-degree angle, which you say it is compliant, but I'll be interested to hear my colleagues' views at this stage. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much. We have Councillor Townsend and then Councillor Cossa. So Councillor Townsend.
Thank you, Chair. Could we go back to the photographs from the presentation, please, of the is there any way we can make those bigger so they take up the screen? Thank you. I have one query about obviously looking from number 3. It looks like the side of number 3. Is that a glass window at the side as well, coming through there? So will that be blocked then by the extension?
Yes, it will.
It will. So that does feel a little bit of an imposition to me, and I just wonder how the 45-degree angle works with that, or whether how you have found that to be acceptable. If you could explain that, that would be really helpful. And the other thing is the issue of the roof lantern, because I think that will obviously issue a lot of light, and whilst obviously it brings light into the room as well, and I'm aware they could do some of this under permitted development anyway, so I know it's difficult, but the light there could be quite bright for people if they've got bedrooms in the next door, because it is quite a cramped site. You know, it is you know, difficult. People are living and they overlap as well, the boundaries of the houses. So trying to be sort of neighbourly on it, there would be a problem with light from that roof lantern, and I just wonder again how you feel the amenity of the neighbours you know, could be affected on that. So that's my 2 queries really.
So in terms of the 45-degree rule, we take the measurement from the far side of the window. So from Old School House, it's been taken from the far side of that window in the bottom, and it doesn't cross. They've also then got a door with a window in into that room. And then in terms of looking from number 3, again, it would be from the far side of the window, and it wouldn't cross the extension proposed. It would impact on the side window, however, they would still be getting light from the larger area. So the side window would be classed as a secondary window.
so the side window that we can see at the moment will be the bottom sort of back door, little bit of the extension that blocks that all in completely.
Yes, it does.
It's a bit of a shame. Thank you. And the roof lantern?
In terms of the roof lantern, this could be constructed as permitted development, and it could be conservatory. We need to take that into consideration.
Thank you. Councillor Cotter.
Thank you very much, Chair. I have to say my initial view when I read the report and looked at the plans and so on was that on balance, and I do accept there are going to be some inconveniences around this. This was not an unreasonable development, and I was certainly inclined to support ultimately, subject to hearing what colleagues here today had to say, the recommendations of our officers on this. The one thing I do, however, always like to do is if I hear from someone who's come along to object, I like to hear, you know, a proper response. I'll give the officers an officer response so I can understand as well to what they've said. Now, a number of the things that were raised, I think have been covered. I hear what's now, I've written down the ones I thought were significant. The one was about the discrepancy in the measurements. The second one was about the 45-degree angle, and I now understand on that, and also the one about the rainwater. The one I did hear, which I didn't fully understand, and I don't know if officers can help us on this, was that there appeared to be some contention about encroachment of the building. The objector saying that it is being asserted that it will not encroach, and now planning, and he's stating that it does encroach. If our officers can offer us any enlightenment on that, I would be very grateful. Now, I didn't quite understand what we were being told there, but I think, you know, we ought to try and address it if we possibly can. I think that's probably all I want to say. I think it is a difficult site. It's a fairly modest proposal in my view. I don't think it is too big. There are some inconveniences, but on balance, I think our officers have just about got this right. But I do want to have a response on what this overbearing issue is, if there is one.
Susie, would you like to respond to that?
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Councillor Cotter. The build is within the boundary line, therefore there's no encroachment.
Yes, just to come back on that, the ownership certificate stated in the application that the applicant is in, the land is, the affected land is in the ownership of the applicant. We have to take that in good faith. If, you know, that sometimes things crop up later after a planning permission is granted, which means that a scheme isn't implementable, and, you know, that is the nature of planning. But as it stands on the face of it, this appears to be, to us, wholly within the curtilage of the applicant's land.
Thank you, Councillor Wilson.
Thank you, Chair. As I looked at this initially, and even now, it looks as though they've got permitted development for a building that could be less sympathetic and with absolutely no input from the planning committee. Is that right? So I think we have to determine this. And if anybody wants to add something to the officer's recommendations, we should do it, because if we don't, then we could leave the neighbours in an even worse position. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Wilson. We have Councillor Townsend and then Councillor Darcy.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you for allowing me to come back. Just on the encroachment issue that Councillor Cotter mentioned, I have been looking at the plans of the back of the house with the extension on it, and the zinc fascia, which tops the extension, does seem to be in complete line with the neighbour's side of the fence. I can appreciate these drawings are quite, you know, very difficult. But is there any way that we can put a condition on, or say anything where we can say that that the zinc fascia must be, that that it must be kept within the fence, as opposed to, if you look at the drawing, it looks, I did use a ruler at home to see, it does look as if it is in line with the other side of the fence. So it does look slightly that it might come over the top. I mean, I don't know whether or not there is anything that we can say there, just to make sure that it is, you know, explicit that the building should not overhang the fence. Is there anything we can say? Thank you.
Thank you. I totally take your point, and my drawings are really, really small, so I'm having to take your word for it. We can certainly put a very clear informative on, just to remind that, just to remind the applicant that the development must, you know, footings, walls, guttering, all of the development must take place.
That would be
wholly
really
within the
helpful.
footage.
Thank you. I'd like to propose that. Thank you.
Thank you very much. We now have a couple more speakers. We have Councillor Darcy and then Councillor Sadler. Councillor Darcy, please.
Thank you, Chair. On page 15, there's a section labelled trees. And there's a second paragraph, there's bottom part of that. It's talking about what the council's tree officer had to say. And he said that there were some trees, the mature trees considered to have high visual amenity further to the northeast rear of this property. Access via the front door for development to proceed is unlikely. Now, he then goes on to say, we therefore need to be assured that the developer that the trees would not be impacted by the proposal, and request a method statement detailing the access route, material storage location, and other development pressure as documented in BS 5837. As far as I could see, there's no condition related to that. I just wondered why that was.
Apologies, that's on the system. It hasn't come through to the report. I've got two conditions, pre-commencement conditions for trees, and they've been approved by the applicant. They will comply with them.
Oh, okay.
Apology.
Fair enough. So it wasn't in the report, so I wasn't wrong to say I hadn't seen it, right? Fair enough. So what are the conditions? Are we going to be told?
I'll read them out. Prior to the commencement of the development hereby permitted, a tree protection plan must be submitted to local planning authority for the prior approval to include location detail of soil, material storage, mixing areas, construction access, and other construction impacts such as the siting of porter cabins, portaloos, and parking areas, unless otherwise agreed by the local planning authority. These shall be placed outside the root protection area. Detail of temporary interlocking static additional ground protection surface layers specifically designed over roots and routing volumes for the specific weight bearing capacity of expected traffic loads within root protection areas. The development hereby permitted shall be carried out in accordance with the approved details. So that's one of them. And the second is the local authority shall be provided at least 2 weeks notice prior to commencement of demolition construction activities. The notice shall include visual evidence of ground and fence protection in accordance with the approved tree protection plan. Okay, do you want me to go? The information must be submitted to the local planning authority for the determination and written approval before development can commence. Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you, Susie. So Councillor Darcy, you are happy with that? Thank you. Councillor Sadler and then Councillor Reid.
Thank you, Chair. The encroachment on the boundary will be resolved because there will have to be a party wall surveyor appointed, and the applicant will have to pay for the neighbours' costs. So if the measurements aren't right, that will be picked up. I thought I'd just make that point.
Councillor Reid.
Thank you, Chair. I know this, I was a parish councillor for Ewhurst and Ellens Green for 8 years. I know this area, I know the buildings, and I will be voting for this because although they are small properties, they're in a lovely position with beautiful outlooks, with the woodland behind. And I don't think that they can do anything to improve other than this sort of development. I was concerned about two things. That was the 45-degree rule. And I was also, like Councillor Sadler, concerned about encroachment, but that is not something that we can discuss at this meeting, sadly. And by the very nature of the buildings, they're going to appear cramped as we see it, especially I'm looking at page 24, and it does look very cramped. But on the other hand, people are very important. They need areas in which to live and good quality areas in which to live. And this is, I think, the only way that improvements can be made for a better quality of life. So I'll be supporting. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Reid. Councillor Townsend, tiny.
Tiny thing, just that the applicant obviously in their in addressing earlier did mention about a construction management plan, and whilst that may be a bit heavy-handed for something like this, I did wonder whether an informative could be put on at all about perhaps just some hours of operation or something like that, just to obviously give the neighbours some kind of assurance.
Thank you, Chairman. Actually, we'd be happy to put on that sort of detail on as a condition.
Thank you. I think Councillor Darcy, you wanted to come back.
Yeah, I was only going to say, I think we've had this discussion before, and didn't we talk about considerate builders or something like that as being a scheme which they should sign up to?
Thank you. So I think that's everybody who wants to speak. So we have a recommendation in front of us. And if I'm correct, we're going to add another condition about the hours of operation and another informative about the Councillor Follows. You have not spoken.
An administrative question. Can I just double check that the numbering of the conditions that were missing? Which number conditions are they? And my apologies, Madam Chair, I asked so that the additional condition is appropriately numbered.
Condition 3 and 4 are the tree conditions.
Thank you. So that would make 5 conditions and 3 informatives. So members, with 5 conditions and 3 informatives, would you like to indicate whether you support the recommendation, please? And those against? And I think that's nobody abstaining. Anybody abstaining? No. Leila.
Motion's carried.
Motion carried. Thank you very much. So then our next application is for Heathstud, Wood Hill Lane, Shamley Green in Guildford. And this is for Tracy to present. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Good evening, members.
Aye.
The application before us is for the addition of exterior cladding to an existing barn. We're looking at Wood Hill Lane, Shamley Green, and the application site is located on the northern side of Wood Hill Lane. On this slide, you can see that there's currently 2 stable buildings and a additional building labelled barn / log, so more of a log store than a barn, as seen here. The photograph on the left is taken from a footpath which runs alongside the application site and is elevated. You can see that the context of the location is very rural. The photo on the right is of the application building. You can see it's open, well, it's open-sided, but there has been some tarpauling and netting that has enclosed on 3 other sides. These are existing elevations. It has a corrugated metal roof at present. The roofing is to stay the same, as is the size. Everything to do with the building is as existing. The proposed metal sheeting is on 3 of the sides. It won't be yellow. It's proposed to be a neutral colour metal sheeting. The application, the matters for consideration are the impact on the green belt, which it falls within the exception of paragraph 149, in that it is an alteration to an existing building, which is not disproportionate to the existing or original building. And the impact upon the character of the area of the AONB and the landscape consideration, which has been concluded by the officers, which is appropriate. Thank you, Chair.
Councillor Cossar.
Just some questions, actually. On paragraph 7, the consultations, we're told that Warnosh Parish Council has an objection. No clue as to what that objection is, which I don't think is, sorry? What's not on the system? Sorry, well, I'm just saying I can't understand what that is. Could we have some clarification around that? Because it's unhelpful somewhere to this committee, but I'm not sure where the fault might lie. And similarly, the Surrey Hills AONB advisor, who, you know, I do like to read their comments when we have them and so on, it says no objection, though raises some issues. And again, I can't find what those issues are. I would actually quite like to know. Is it, well, I haven't had a chance, I'm afraid, to go into the system to read all of them online in this one, but I have read the report. And I think if they were there, it should perhaps be in the report.
Thank you. Tracy, have you any additional information to add?
So the Warnosh Parish Council raised objections and basically just said that they wish to call the application into committee. And the AONB advisor said the application, bear with me a second, let me just read it. It concludes that there is no AONB harm. It says lots of other things which aren't wholly relevant to this application, as there was a previous refusal for a 2-storey dwelling on the site. Yeah, yeah.
Thank you very much. Are there any other speakers on this? Oh, okay. Councillor Reid and then Councillor Darcy.
Thank you, Chair. It is in the ALGV as well as the AONB and very many areas of ancient woodland. But I think I agree with Clive Smith, the AONB advisor, planning advisor on this, that it doesn't impact because it's cladding, which is a sort of neutral colour. And there's no substantial alterations to the building other than that. So I shall be voting for. Thank you.
Yeah, I just wanted to ask what neutral colour might be, because We know it's not yellow. That's all I know. What do you mean by neutral?
Neutral. So one would expect it would be a neutral colour, around like silvery grey, neutral, because it's metal, rather than a powder coated metal, which we would have thought that that would have been suggested. However, if we do want to restrict colour, we can.
Thank you. Councillor Wilson.
First off, I think it would be an improvement to the building. And I understand that it is actually removing clutter into something that will tidy up the area. So for that, I was for it. But I would suggest that we, looking at the picture, look for a greenish color, a light green, or to match in with the trees that are behind it. Thank you.
Thank you. There are greens of all shades, aren't there? Yes, emerald green might not be. However, Councillor Else, that's why I couldn't find you.
Couldn't remember my name either. I mean, quite frankly, I'm surprised this has come to planning at all, really. It's the sort of thing that usually farmers and equestrian people just clad buildings like this without reference to anybody. So it's quite good that they've taken the trouble to make the planning application. I can't see any problem with it. And the only thing I would say is that condition number 2 says no variation to the type and colour of the external materials, and we don't know what the external. So can I suggest that condition 2 is that samples be submitted for approval by the planning officer? Thank you.
Yes, that's a very good point. So how about we change number 2? It's no development shall take place until a sample or specification detailing the colour of the proposed cladding has been submitted to and approved to the local planning authority.
Thank you very much, Tracy. Councillor Dinas and then Councillor Follows. Councillor Dinas.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Can I just confirm, and it just so I've got this right, looking on the system, there is a email from Councillor Chris Howard. Are you saying that is the Wannish Parish Council's objection? Because I still can't find anything on the system other than from Councillor Howard, and that's not from a Wannish email address. Well, she's Wannish and Shamley Green, they're from the same parish. Oh, I do, yeah. So I want to check, because that's a personal one. Was there because you've put Wannish Parish Council, is there one? Because it's not on the system. So that was my first question, just to make sure that there isn't somewhere lurking. Right, you've got it. It's not coming up here.
With your indulgence, Chair, as Tracy said earlier, all it says is they object and they want it called in,
Right.
basically.
So
that
you've
is the
answered, it's a
objection.
separate one, which for some reason when I've searched, it's not in the documents, but that's fine. Just the one comment, and just whether that comes into condition 2. When you look at page 28, paragraph 12, second line, and it says, whilst the material is not of the highest quality, this is green belt. I think we should be asking for some good quality materials and not something that we say is poor quality. So can we say that we talk about the colour, but actually the quality, if it's been identified as not particularly good, surely we should be demanding a higher standard.
The material is adequate for its use. We wouldn't really expect anything more. I think to push for something different, yeah, would be unreasonable. So whilst I am stating that, a metal tin cladding, which would be wholly appropriate, isn't the most prestigious material, it's adequate and appropriate in this instance. That's what my report goes towards saying, and I think that's fine. Thank you very much.
Firstly, Councillor Follows, you do want to speak. Okay.
Councillor Else dealt with the main issue with that, so thank you, Councillor Else. Just a quick admin question again. I mean, if a parish council submits such an objection, which basically actually doesn't provide any planning grounds for an objection whatsoever, do planning officers write back and ask for one to be given? Because to be honest, if that's what they're going to say, I can't see how that's admissible, and the committee shouldn't take the time with it. I mean, so can we go back to Warnish and say, we're absolutely happy to hear your objections, but perhaps state what they are?
The quick answer is no. No, it's not just Warnish, it's not just this application. Lots of application will come back with a plain, we support this application, or we object to this application, so we can't invite further dialogue.
May I make a request, Madam Chair, that if we do get a parish council that puts that, could the objection, the notice in the box in the report state that they've merely objected without comment or without explanation, so that we understand that that's what they've done and can take it with an appropriate weight?
Noted. Councillor Reid.
Thank you, Chair. I just want to come back on the impact of ancient buildings, of which barns and sheds can be classed as these. I think they probably want to make these weatherproof, but I don't think we can make a decision on the nature of the barn structure behind it. It would have been nice, I suppose, if it had been left, if it had been built perhaps of oak, which would have gone into a silvery colour and been left to be naturally acclimatized to the situation it's in. It is not a pristine main building. I don't know, apart from the fact that it's going to be made more weatherproof, whether there was a necessity to clad it, but that is probably the only reason. And I agree that we should perhaps ask for the materials when we've decided on that they should be approved. But we can't alter, and we shouldn't alter, I don't think, in the green belt, the NOB and the area of great landscape value, then we can't assume to alter the very nature of ancient buildings. That's all I want to say, really.
Thank you, Councillor Sadler.
Thank you, Chair. I presume that building regulations will be required for that, and that will mean that the material used will have to be fit for use. So,
I don't believe the building regs will, this building will be subject to building regs because it's not a residential building.
Thank you. So we've had a good discussion. So again, we have a recommendation now with a changed condition about the sample of the colour coming to be reviewed before. So with that change to the condition and with the informative, the recommendation is to grant. So all those in favour, please signify. Thank you. So our next application is at Tyler's Court, Rowland Road, Cranley. Yeah. Reasonably happy, I think. Yeah. So Dylan, it's over to you. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. This application was previously presented to Planning Committee in December. It was deferred for clarification on whether or not the proposed parking layout would impact safe egress from the emergency exits to the rear of the High Street. So I'll briefly run through the presentation again as a bit of a refresh. So here we've got the application site outlined in red, located to the east side of Rowland Road and set to the north of Cranley High Street. This is the proposed block plan. Here you can see the building at 2.5 stories. Proposed parking spaces here, but the site plan has been amended to show the parking more clearly with the existing access. Some site photographs. So it shows the application building, the access road leading in, and some of the adjacent buildings here with that path that runs down here. Some more application photos, either side of the boundary to the building. Some more photographs. It's the existing parking outside of the application site. Here you've got the residential dwellings opposite the application site, and some of the building here with the existing roof lights, some obscure glazed windows here. So the existing elevations, existing floor plans, the proposed site plan. So you've got a small courtyard here serving unit 1, small courtyard here serving unit 2, cycle storage, and a timber-clad bin storage to serve units 2, 3, and 4. The proposed ground floor, which are wholly occupied by units 1 and 2. Again, you can see the courtyards either side. The proposed first floor, where you've got the second bedroom of unit 1 and unit 3. And unit 4 in the loft space here. Proposed roof plan. And the elevations, west elevation, the north elevation with some obscure glazed windows here to protect neighbouring privacy, and the east elevation here, again to protect neighbouring privacy, and the existing obscure glazed windows on the ground floor, and the proposed south elevation. I won't go through the history of the site again, because it's quite long-winded, haven't heard it the first time. What I will do, I'll go back to the proposed site plan, which we've had amended for some clarity, and provide the update since the previous application, since the previous committee in December. So here we have the proposed block plan that's been submitted to better show the proposed parking layout. The applicants have now marked on the existing footway and included the existing doors, which were the original, which were the cause for concern. The plan shows that the access can be kept clear when vehicles are parked, and there's space to exit from the doors onto the footway. These doors also open inwards. They've also have indicative locations of the EV charging points, and as there was a condition attached to the recommendation for detailed matters to be submitted at a later date. The Surrey Fire and Rescue team have been consulted on the application and asked in particular, or asked to pay particular attention to the proposed parking spaces adjacent to the York House and the High Street properties, and if there are any concerns regarding cars blocking the emergency exits of these properties. In response, the Fire and Rescue Service have advised that under the Surrey Act 1985, section 20, paragraph I5, it should be ensured that the access to the existing buildings is made no worse. The response goes on to say that the buildings or extension to buildings will not render inadequate access to existing means, will not render inadequate existing means of access for the fire brigade to neighbouring buildings. The above application has been examined by the fire safety inspecting officer, and it appears that it will meet the access requirements of approved document B, section B5, building regulations. So with this in mind, the application is recommended for approval with conditions. Thank you very much.
Thank you. So I'm sure we have some speakers. Councillor Cotter.
I just want to get into the question. I might want to say something later, but on where those cars are shown, are you saying that the exit is right at the back there? I'm just trying to see. Oh, it's there. Yeah. And you're saying that there's sufficient width because of the pavement area?
That's right. So the door opens inwards and there's sufficient space, sufficient width on the
Okay.
access. The cars won't block
Right,
the
no,
access.
I had slightly misunderstood what you said. I now understand it. Thank you.
No problem.
Councillor Townsend.
Thank you, Chairman. I mean, this is not a particularly attractive site. It's tucked in the back of, the high street. It's disappointing that there's no landscaping. I mean, the original application did have some little garden areas to the front. I presume they couldn't put them in there, as I said before, because of the turning area. I did ask officers earlier about the condition, which was about the parking and whether or not we could reasonably enforce it, because there was a slight contradiction in the report saying at 1 minute it was a civil matter, the parking, and then the other minute we could actually enforce it. That we can enforce, where people are parking and keeping the turning circle clear. I can assure you that turning circle is hardly ever clear, really, because people park there to go into the Oxfam shop, including me, to drop off their big bags of Oxfam, and there are very big bins there at the back of the Oxfam shop too, the big bins, with the lift up lids. I mean, it really isn't somewhere that I think, it is much better as an office. However, we do have the application before us. One of the things that I wanted to talk about was the whether or not the possibility of changing the car parking, so to have 2 spaces on the northern edge of the site there and just 2 spaces on the southern edge of the site, which would make far better perhaps use. So yeah, tandem parking up there where the cursor just was, and 2 spaces down there, which then would make the opportunity to block York House and that entrance coming out a little bit less. And I mean, I would imagine, I would find it very difficult to believe, knowing the site, that anyone could pull a wheelie bin down that pathway. I mean, they might, if they do, they're going to take off the wing mirrors of the cars that are parked there. So they do have to bring it out. And I am concerned about the pedestrian access and where the EV chargers are going to go, because it is so cramped there. I can't see how they can fit in. I mean, the whole site is cramped. And I said this before, and I know we deferred it for the fire safety and the parking, but I said at that time that I was unhappy with other things as well. I just wonder whether or not officers could also explain the fallback position as well, because I don't think now the application that they had approved previously, which is the CR, sorry, the number, you'll know it. So that doesn't have any weight any longer or something. Sorry, if you could just explain that. So really, I'm asking if the configuration of the parking could be changed in any way in order to facilitate just more space down on that bottom edge, and about the weight of the previous application. If you could just answer those for now, and I have a couple of other things with those for now. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you very much. Yes, we could certainly include a condition, that something along the lines of notwithstanding the proposed block plan, the parking layout is to be submitted, an amended parking layout is to be submitted and approved in writing. That takes those comments on board, along with the location of the EV charging point being shifted over there as well with that parking space. In terms of the fallback position, you're right, that reference CR something has since lapsed. The building still benefits from PD rights under Class MA, where the building now falls within a use Class E, so that if the applicants were minded, they could submit a prior approval application, which there would be limited considerations in that to determine whether or not it could be converted to residential.
Thank you. And I just had a couple of other things, if I can come back, Chair. If you could go back to the pictures of the building for the north side. So the photos, apologies, the photos. It seems to me that one, yeah, at that top one, that top position there looks like there's a French door being put into the top of the building there. It doesn't look, no, on the other side, looking over, it looks as if there's also a French door there. I don't know whether there is, but I know that some works have taken place already on the building. And I just wondered that doesn't change on that side, the configuration in the plans. So if they've made any changes, it will have to go back to the configuration in the plans as on that north side, because that's the side that overlooks obviously Victoria Way there. So if you, and also that all of those windows will be obscured glass as well on that side of it, except for the little top openings, which will be the normal glass. So is there anything on that side which has been changed at this point? Do you know?
Yeah, some new windows at first floor have been installed, so the grey ones that you can see, but as part of the approved plans, we'd expect them to be in place in accordance with the approved plans and obscure glazed as well, as outlined.
Okay, so there wouldn't be any chance of a non-material amendment coming through later on to say, you know, that they can keep what's there?
They'd certainly be entitled to submit an application, but
Yeah.
we'd determine it at that point
Okay.
to whether or not there'd be an impact on privacy.
Okay, and there was a little bit of confusion about the response, I know, from Victoria Road about the parking space, sorry, not the parking spaces, the whether or not the overlooking of amenity space or anything like that. And I think that was cleared up, wasn't it? That you said that with the obscure glazing that there wouldn't be any overlooking of that amenity space on Victoria Road, on the gardens there. Because I know the distance isn't as good as we would like. I think it's something, I can't remember the exact measurement, but it doesn't actually, you know, ideally it doesn't meet it. So it is important that those, you know, the obscure glazing on that side is protects the amenity of the people living in those properties on Victoria Road there.
Yes, that's right. The obscure glazing up to a certain level, up to that fan light level on some of the windows where they're habitable spaces to provide an element now of outlook, but not directed down into residential gardens.
Okay, thank you. And on those windows as well, are we going to fix them shut as well on that side? So, and because going to the layout of the, could you just go to the floor plan layout? Ooh, that's it there. So that would be then the lounge and the bedroom that would not have any, that both of those would be fixed shut. Is there any issue with that, having a bedroom window that you, obviously that is completely, well, mostly obscure, but fixed shut, but you've said you've got the openings which open.
Yes, the fan light openings.
I was a bit confused by the fixing shut and the little bits that opened. So are they fixed shut or do they open?
The window from above 1.7 meters can be a fan light that
Right,
opens.
okay, thank
to
you
allow for
for
ventilation.
clarifying that. Okay, that's all the questions I've got at the moment. I mean, I'm going to listen to what other, you know, the other councillors say. Obviously, I am aware of, you know, the ability for them to submit something else anyway. But equally, you know, for me, it is just, you know, it isn't a particularly attractive place really to live. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Townsend. Councillor Cotter.
Thank you very much, Chairman. I did say last time when we debated this that given the very difficult site and the, you know, the tight location here, I did, you know, having listened to the debate and having read all the papers, I took the view that the conclusion of our officers that on balance this was an acceptable proposal was the right one, but was happy to agree the deferral because colleagues were pointing out possible issues about egress and so on and where we were going to put the charging points and so on, which I didn't know the answers to, and I thought it was reasonable for us to have those answers. We now have a report in front of us in which we have answers from our officers, which I'm reading in the report seem entirely satisfactory, and I've no reason to think that they aren't. I have, however, received a very large volume of correspondence from person I assume to be a local resident, I guess other committee members have. I just really wanted, I'm still reasonably happy on everything I know to support this proposal, but I just wanted to ask our officers whether they have also been sent that correspondence, and if there was anything in it that they would want to comment on or would in any way amend anything they've said to us in their report. I think that's just a question we need to ask.
Thank you. Dylan, anything?
Without having it in front of you, I wouldn't be sure what correspondence you're referring to. Yes, yes, we've received that information. That's the case. Yeah, we've received it and assessed it. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Ellis, and then Councillor Darcy.
Thank you, Chairman. Many of the questions I wanted to ask were asked by Councillor Townsend, and thank you for the responses. I'm afraid I do retain a huge number of concerns about this particular application. And yes, I too have received a number of communications from residents in the area who are concerned about it. One very detailed comment, if you like. I think the issue has been touched on again, but it would appear that following our deferment of the application, the last time we considered it, the application, the plans were actually passed to the Surrey Fire and Rescue Services for comment. And the officer, thank you, has touched on that. But in one of the communications that I received, it would appear to me that a further communication has been received from the Surrey Fire and Rescue Services to actually rather change the report that we've been given, to suggest that a mistake was made in their original answer. And I wondered if you could comment on that. Thank you.
Thank you very much. So in the initial response from the Fire and Rescue Service, there was a mistake. So it's their Word document template. Both agreed that the application is acceptable, and in the next paragraph raised objections just where there was an error in the template that you used. The updated consultation response and through emails through myself and their team confirmed that was the error, and they did not object to the application.
I'm sorry, that appears to conflict with the information I've received, but I have to accept that that is the case. Thank you very much for that. I really do have grave concerns about the access for pedestrians. There are many pedestrians who have legitimate right to access through this site. The pavement from the two buildings, York House, and also the unnamed building that is attached to it, that also has two doors leading from it onto this footway. That pathway is extremely narrow, and I think it's actually going to become narrower now than it was previously. So that if you then put the EV charging posts on this pavement, there's unspecified dimensions about the EV chargers, the size of them. and they're represented really by a very small mark on the actual plans. There's trailing, I think, charger cables. These will be hazardous and unsafe for those people who are legitimately using that access. So that I do feel that perhaps anybody in a wheelchair, disabled, suffering from poor sight, anybody pushing a pram or a buggy won't actually be able to use that safe pathway there, and will need to actually take to the road. The roadway is actually very narrow, and there are cars going to be parked on either side. I don't think that the bins that actually service all of the additional properties there, there's another flat. The building here, York House, and I think there are at least 5 other properties that their bins are to the rear of the building and will have to be taken out to Rowland Road along this access. And it's very narrow. And I'm sorry, I feel potentially very dangerous. I think that, as was mentioned in the correspondence, and I believe it to be the case, Exeter House is still classified as office accommodation, and that marketing for it has probably not been carried out since at least 2017. So Cranley Parish Council, I have a huge amount of respect for their observations. They are the centre of the community in Cranley, and they objected to this application on the grounds that it would stop the potential for start-up businesses to use the space. I think the issue regarding overlooking has been addressed, thank you. And I do think that this is in a residential area, but because of the nature of the building, the windows, I think you've adequately covered that. But there is one, as my colleague mentioned, window that appears to have become a door, a double door, and that overlooks properties and gardens and terraces. Thank you, Chairman. I've concentrated mainly on what I consider to be the safety hazards associated with this application. But as my colleague also said, it's a very small, a very constrained, very unattractive site. It's in the centre of the village, very close to the Cranley Conservation Area and a number of listed buildings. The off-site parking facilities are non-existent, really. It's in an area that has major parking issues, so that people visiting this accommodation would find it difficult to park anywhere close by. The nearest Waverley car park is quite some distance, and the other side of the Cranley High Street. I don't think that the proposed development of Exeter House can be seen as a high quality design that integrates well within the site or provides safe access for pedestrians and road users. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Ellis. We have Councillor Darcy, Councillor Denis and Councillor Hegan. So Councillor Darcy.
Thank you very much. On page 39, it says that local plan part 2 policy DM5 has substantial weight. So it's interesting, I had a look at policy DM5. And I suppose my first question is about whether this is relevant to this particular development, because it says, this is the second part of DM5, which is safeguarding amenity, it's called, the whole policy. All proposals for new housing developments should demonstrate that they provide adequate internal and external space in order to ensure an appropriate living environment for future occupiers. To achieve this, the development should. And then it goes on to say they should meet housing standards, space standards. So the question I would have is, given this is a material change of use, a very significant material change of use, and is in effect creating 4 new dwellings, should we be considering this to be a new development? And my argument would be that clearly that's the intent, because we're not talking about space standards not applying here, because it's already mentioned in the report that they are being considered. So in that case, it brings us on to part B, which is the development should provide an area of external amenity space for each dwelling that is private, usable, secure and defensible, and appropriately located. And also does not create a barrier, but that's fine. So clearly that's not the case, because we have 2 very, very small courtyards for 2 of the units, but the other 2 units have nothing at all as far as I can see. And it says in the report that having regard to the location adjacent to the village centre and recreational opportunities in the wider area, it is considered acceptable in this instance. Well, I note there's no such caveat in DM5. Therefore, I think that's arguable, frankly. So that's my main query, although I would go on to say that part C of DM5(2) is that it should meet the high standards of accessible and inclusive design, including meeting the needs of less mobile people and those with disabilities. And again, clearly it fails on that count. So how much relevance can we give? We know we can give substantial weight, but does it apply to this type of development? That's the question really for you. And if you go on to say that no, it doesn't, then we're going to have a serious argument about that. Thank you.
Dylan, is that for you to respond to?
Thank you very much. As you know, the local plan part 2 isn't yet adopted, and we do have adopted policies to determine applications by, which this proposal is considered to meet. You have highlighted having regard to the location of the site, other recreational opportunities, it's considered acceptable in this instance. In terms of local plan part 2, at paragraph 2.42, it does allow for that if there is public open space, which is readily accessible by foot, there may be justification for less external amenity space. However, it is important that private and semi-private spaces for residential is still provided. So in this instance, it is a town centre location. It's a constrained site, and it's trying to work with what is available to deliver a quite a constrained scheme against the need for housing. And Barnes has been taken as acceptable in this instance. Thank you.
Thank you. I beg your pardon.
Can I just add one more thing? Sorry, thank you. Thank you. I'd also just like to pick up on the safety aspect. And then the County Highway Authority have been consulted, and in their response, they clarify it's been assessed on safety, capacity and policy grounds, and they don't have any objections subject to the conditions. Obviously, I'm saying that mindful of the amended the condition that we're going to possibly add in the event that this is granted. But they have also recommended the condition in relation to the electric vehicle charging points, that full details of that would have to be submitted and approved by the local planning authority also. So I'd just like to pick up the point on safety. Thank you.
Thank you. I think it's Councillor Denis next.
Thank you. Not sure how many times we've actually had this application in front of us. But I'll be honest, I haven't been convinced from day one on this one. I'll go through my points. Some of them have already been made, but just the points I was going to make. From day one, I think this is overdevelopment, it's cramped. I've always felt the access for pedestrians is poor. The loss of amenity to other residents and for the current residents, I think it fails on that. The EV charging, all the EV charging points I've seen, Councillor Ellis, are normally, you know, probably a foot from the, you know, into the pavement. You know, it's not right against it, so it is going to take out virtually all of that. And I think the only way I can describe this application, and I think I've probably used this one on this one before, this is trying to put a pint in a half-pint glass. This is totally inappropriate. And, you know, it really, really concerns me that people are going to be potentially living in these premises, and I wouldn't want that on anybody. Thank you.
Thank you very much. We have Councillor Hegan, Councillor Wilson, Councillor Townsend, and then Councillor Ellis again. So, Councillor Hegan.
Thank you. I was going to pick up on the safety point, and the answer that we just had there, that County Highways have said there's not a problem from a safety perspective. But I have been reading quite a bit recently about problems for disabled people with this new generation of extra hazards on the pavement generally, and this is a terribly narrow pavement. So my question to officers is, when these plans come forward for approval, you know, how much cognizance do you take of the width of a wheelchair, the width of the parking bay, that, you know, that there is really genuinely room to get past without having to step into the road? Because I think there's a lot of assumptions, you know, from what I've read generally, that actually we owe it more to people who have those sort of problems. You know, pushchairs and wheelchairs are not small, and we do need to have some comfort that if we accept a condition that calls for review by officers, what criteria do they use?
Thank you. Would you like to respond to that? Or while you're thinking, Councillor Wilson, would you like to speak?
Thank you, Chair. In the first instance, I think that the living conditions for the people that would live in this building have been improved by our deferral. I think it's a lot better, but I looked at the plan of the parking spaces, and it appeared that the charging points were actually within the parking spaces, not on the pavement. That is what the plan shows. I've seen some of the chargers that are around in the streets, which are actually quite a narrow pillar. And I think if you put one of these in a parking space rather than on the pavement, that would actually make a considerable distance. Also, looking at the plan of access and the plan of parking, would it be possible for us to move the actual parking spaces further from the access and have the pavement extended slightly to cover wheelchairs, wheelie bins? Is this within our remit? And the biggest point of all, I think, is how are they going to actually make sure that these parking spaces are designated to the residents of these buildings? I saw a picture of a couple of vans parking where the parking spaces would be, and I don't think people are going to make it that easy for us. It's not a nice, neat little plan. It's going to be full of all kinds of things and all kinds of people doing different things. So I think we really do need to look at, is it possible to widen the access to a safe degree, put the charging points within the parking spaces, which if you look at the diagram, you can see they are. And I think that would be a good idea. And with Councillor Townsend's suggestion that one of the parking spaces was actually moved to the north side, it might go some way to alleviating the problems. The only other question I've got, is there no other access to these buildings other than down that shared road? And I'd like an answer, can we do anything about the access width by making sure that the charging points are within the car parking spaces? Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Wilson. Would you like to respond to those queries?
Thank you, Chair. Thank you for your patience as well. Just in terms of the access point, this is a no-through road. Someone wouldn't necessarily come into this private land without, if they didn't live there, for example. Present Company Executive. So in terms of access into the rear, towards the property itself, or the building itself, you wouldn't necessarily do that unless you live there, for example. So if it was a thoroughfare and members of the public were going up and down all of the time, I think there would be more of a concern there. But as that isn't the case, and the Highway Authority are satisfied that there is no objection and it is safe for pedestrians. In terms of the location of the EV charging points, we do have a condition recommended whereby the full details of that is to be approved. Now, if that results in the location of those charging points as they're shown on the plan being relocated to the edge of the footway or within the space itself, because I know they do vary when you sort of, from place to place, they are on the highway sometimes and they are on the footpath sometimes. So I think that's something that can be resolved through conditions, so there isn't an obstruction there. And it's effectively private land. So the Highway Authority was satisfied that the proposed conditions would be sufficient to ensure the safety of the users of the space and the occupiers of the proposal. Thank you.
Thank you. We have next Councillor Townsend to speak.
Thank you. Just a couple of things. I mean, at the moment, it might be private land, but there are rights of way, obviously, for the restaurant there and for the Oxfam shop. And obviously they've got the big bins. So I don't think, I'm not sure whether they drag that to the front of I can't imagine they do. So whilst I can appreciate that it might be private land, but there is also a lot going on there already. And we're introducing pedestrians into that space as well. And with all the best will in the world, that footpath is very narrow. So if you, even saying you're going to decide on the charging points later, if they got put into the parking spaces, they get knocked over. The parking spaces aren't huge, and I can't see how people can back in and out if there were charging points. I mean, logistically, it would be a nightmare to do that. So I can't see. And the turning circle, whilst you've got the condition on there, I mean, what we're going to be there, they're meant to be, a planning condition has to be necessary, relevant to planning, relevant to the development, enforceable, precise, and reasonable in all other respects. This isn't enforceable. I mean, with all the best will in the world, is one of us going to stand there and stop people parking in the turning circle? I just can't see it as being enforceable. I really can't. And I think it's raising an expectation that we would be unable to fulfill, to be honest. And whilst it needs to be empty most of the time, because as I said before, those French doors open straight out into the turning circle, there's no demarcation. I did ask whether or not you could put a flower bed there or some kind of fence or bollards or something to stop a car driving literally up to someone's French door, which is what they can do at the moment. I just, the only thing why I'm kind of hesitating slightly is because of the permitted development rights. And could we end up, if say we decided to refuse this tonight, my concern is we could end up inflicting a much worse application on the people around there because of permitted development. And that is what is making me coming back to umming and ahhing. And I apologise for my umming and ahhing, but I wouldn't want, you know, permitted development with no conditions and the people having to put up with that round there. So I suppose what I want is officers to let me to clarify what kind of permitted development rights they might have, because that's the only thing that's stopping me. This is not a nice application, and it's not going to be a particularly nice place to live, but equally, could it be much, much worse?
Thank you. Glenn.
Yes, so just on the point of permitted development rights, so it would be an application for prior approval, and we'd be able to consider things such as contamination, flood risk, highway safety, space standards, and adequate daylight. It wouldn't take account of neighbouring residential amenities such as loss of privacy or overlooking.
Thank you. Councillor Ellis.
Thank you for allowing me to come back, and I'm sorry to return to it, but could I just ask for clarification about the conflict between the EV chargers and pedestrian safety? The roadway where the cars will park, where it leaves Rowland Road, it's not public highway, it's a private area. So would County Council, Highways Department comment on that? And equally, I'm sorry, I'd like to come back to the building that's attached to York House that has 2 doors for egress from that building out onto that very narrow pavement with another car parking or the car parking space there. Perhaps you would comment on that. Thank you.
Thank you. Yes, you're right. The County Council Highways officer visited the site on the 13th of September and concluded that there was no detrimental impact in terms of highway safety. They looked at the width of the access, visibility displays, noted the slow speeds at which cars enter and exit the site, and highlighted no safety concerns.
Thank you. And the 2 doors leading from the building attached to York House?
Yeah, so the furthest door is the access to the building that's not in front of the car parking spaces. The door further down opens inwards towards the site and doesn't impede access onto that access footway. And as you can see, the parking spaces are quite generous there. I think each one's a little over a metre longer than parking requirements, and there's adequate space to navigate onto the footpath around the vehicles. But that part.
My apologies. There are 3 doors leading directly out onto that very narrow pathway. I mean, quite frankly, those cars will have to be pretty small to park in those spaces. I mean, I don't mind parking, but, you know, it's going to be difficult.
It is also an existing situation where cars currently park, and that won't be changing.
Thank you, Councillor Dinas.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And it's a point that Councillor Wilson made, but if you look at the proposed block plan we've got up on the screen, and you've got the vehicles and you've got a little blob to the back of them, that's not the EV charging. The EV charging, when you look at the plans on the website, is on the pavement. It's not actually, so it's on that space. So the actual EV ones you can just see now. even though I can see that from my eyesight. Where originally I thought, looking at the plans, it was where actually it's a figure 06, because that's what it looks like on our papers. That's not the EV, just in case anybody misread that. It's actually on the pavement. You can just about see it now saying EV. Yeah, you have to go onto the map and expand it to look at the details, yeah. Thank you.
Clarification, we then have councillor Townsend, then councillor Reid. Councillor
And I'm so
Townsend.
sorry for coming back, but I'm sorry, apologies, councillor Cossa. I mean, I'm looking at a picture of the area and which a resident has submitted, but I know the area, I know this hasn't been doctored in any way. And there's a wheelie bin on there and there's very little space. Nobody would be able to walk past with the wheelie bin there. But and the pavement is very narrow. And I don't even think, I know the drawing there shows the pavement going right up to Rowland Road there. But I don't honestly believe the pavement does go up to Rowland Road. I think it just ends in a muddy little heap on the end of the access. So I think that I'm not quite sure that, I don't think pedestrians are being accommodated here at all. And if the EV points go on there, then the pedestrians will be walking out. And whether we like it or not, we're introducing pedestrians here. And it is an area where other vehicles have rights of way across it, and quite biggish vehicles come in here, vans with picking up stuff from the Oxfam, because, you know, the excess clothes that they don't use or stuff that's not quite good enough, that's picked up by quite a big vehicle. And yeah, anyway, I don't think the pedestrian, if Surrey thought that that was right, I mean, what are the measurements? What measurements have they given for that pedestrian footpath area? Are there any given?
So the measure is approximately 60 centimeters wide. 60 centimeters. But the assessment is based on the existing situation. It's an office building that generates its own traffic, and cars do currently park there. And that situation isn't proposed to change.
Okay, I think we have councillor Reid, then councillor Cossa.
Thank you, Chair. I know this area like the back of my hand, and quite honestly, Surrey Highways can only comment on the access, the display, and that's it really. And so it's not appropriate to even consider it in this case, in my opinion. I'm glad you've got that picture up, because those outline drawings of parking spaces, and I think there are 7 there, that's not how it is in reality. In fact, it looks more like 5 spaces. They're all allocated to various people that use the buildings around. The area that is south up for us, and it's yeah, it is south as the compass points on the actual converted or the proposed conversion of this office section. It goes to a point, it's rather like a kite. Now, if you look down to the point and then work your way back from this outside area, when we visited on the first visit, that was full of wheelie bins. It was completely blocked with that. The whole area, the access into that area, they're really, I mean, we talk about a turning point. You've got to be very lucky to actually turn there, because refuse has to be collected, and it's not just our biffa bins, it is commercial waste that is taken away from the backs of the shops, which back on to the main street, the high street. There are now more flats on the opposite side of the entrance here. They've got no parking spaces. We've got the building, which part of bank buildings here, or opposite bank buildings, which is the one that's not complete on the bottom left. that is full of 3 or 4 flats. They've got no parking. We've got, you know, our community centre role is behind. People park in Victoria Road. It's just very, very congested. And I want to comment now on the parking on, it's not a pavement. I want to express that. It is pavers, old-fashioned little pavers that are put along this building nearest us, the buildings nearest us. Then it's not a footway. I think people have used it in the past. It looks like an old alleyway. It is not really fit for purpose. And to block it again with EV charging points, and as Councillor Ellis has said, you know, charging cables is absolutely mad and ridiculous. Despite all that, my original comments made apply, that I'm very disappointed, especially now, not only with the point that Councillor Townsend has made about the vehicles crashing into the building, whether, you know, are big doorways, double doors, glazed doors. It is not really fit for human occupation, in my opinion. I said that before. I feel very, very sorry if this gets approval for the people actually who happen to live there. I don't like the idea of it at all. I wouldn't want, you know, it's cruel to have people living in obscure, but behind obscure glazing with just a little ventilation at the top. And I thank Councillor Darcy for what he said about the substantial weight. Thank you for that, Councillor Darcy, and pointing that out. And I do think that should be looked into, you know, in more detail. So basically, I'm very disappointed. I know that things have been going on at that building, and this is what annoys me. You know, it hasn't properly got planning permission, and yet things have changed. Windows, doors, double doors, glazed doors. And that is really, really annoying as far as I'm concerned. They're flouting our planning policy.
Thank you, Councillor Cossa.
You know, I'm not sure if we've set some sort of record in terms of the amount of time spent on the side in relation to the size of the application, but to just try and make a serious point, I mean, people clearly have quite strong views about this and so on, and at least to some extent they are different. I've seen a whole number of sites in a town and sort of you know, similar situation. I have walked around here. I know sites, you know, in the town centre in Golden where accommodation is always going to be difficult. If people do actually have some choice, you know, in whatever form of tenure they are, as to whether to accept accommodation or not. And I think that we may think that this is something we don't want to live in, but I don't think that's a justification for saying we shouldn't approve it. I also think Councillor Townsend, in one of her contributions, made a very significant point that if we do turn this down, not only have we got to find legitimate reasons for doing so, but we have to consider what the impact is of them putting in a prior application and what that might do in terms of providing another sort of application. I think my real plea, Chairman, is can we not allow people to keep coming back on this? I think people have made their minds up. Can we just move to a vote?
Okay. I think everybody has in fact spoken except for Councillor Follows and maybe we do indeed have a recommendation on our agenda. The recommendation is to grant with conditions 1 to 8 and informatives 1 to 8. Councillor Townsend.
Sorry for coming back. It's just that we did say that we might put in a condition about the parking as well, to have it approved, because to be honest, I think that and the EVs, where they're going to go, do really correspond to each other, and you can't really do one without the other. So if anybody is going to approve it, then I would like that condition put on, please.
Yep. Okay. So with conditions 1 to 9 and the informatives, the recommendation is to grant. Would all those in favour of the recommendation please signify? And those against? And those abstaining?
The application is not granted.
Not granted. So we need an alternative proposal. Councillor Townsend.
Sorry, I've taken up enough time, I know, on this one. I mean, I think that it's due to, you know, the cramped nature of the, I mean, we've had conditions on this before for refusal, the cramped nature of the site, the living conditions of people living in the site, you know, with the obscure glazing, the inability to provide, you know, if we can quote DM5, the inability to create for private amenity space, the sorry, I don't think we can have an accessibility because it's not, highways haven't put in a
Excuse me, Chair, I think we need a recommendation first of all, which is then seconded, and then you can speak to your recommendation, Councillor Townsend.
Apologies, I was asked to provide something.
So your recommendation is to refuse.
To refuse, thank you.
Is there a
Chairman.
seconder? There is. Councillor Townsend.
Thank you. I mean, officers can help me with this, the cramped conditions, the living conditions, perhaps the access, pedestrian access, anything on that. I don't think we will be able to do anything on that. The quality of the living conditions, really, I suppose, and the cramped and trying to put too much into the site. I think there's lots of other reasons, but they probably wouldn't hold up on to appeal. Overdevelopment, yeah, of the site. Yeah, I think they're talking.
Yeah, thank you.
Happy to offer some suggested wording. If you do. No, I'm happy to. Yes, so the proposed development being an overdevelopment of the site, cramped site layout, contrived internal layout in terms of the outlook, results in an overdevelopment of the site and poor living conditions for future occupiers, contrary to policies D1 and D4 for the local plan 2002, TD1 of the local plan part 1, and we can extend that to policy DM5 of the emerging local plan.
Councillor Townsend, are you happy with that?
Yes, thank you, Chair. Thank you, and thank you, officers.
So I think everybody, Councillor Ellis.
Sorry, Chairman. I'm particularly concerned about access and safety for pedestrians. I think that's covered in policy D4. I can't believe that. I mean, I accept that this is something that I know.
It's okay. It's okay. We have a response. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. If I may, the refusal reason, as Dylan suggested, included cramped sites layout, and I guess in terms of that being part of the reason is the fact that we're not satisfied that all of the required movements and parking and bins and etc. can be provided within the site that is provided. So whilst I would be nervous about a highways related reason, I would be more I think it would be more reasonable to encapsulate it within the overall site layout and the cramped nature of it, if that helps.
Thank you, Councillor Reid.
It doesn't fulfill the adequate servicing of the facilities for parking, for EV charging, and yes, those two.
Thank you. Thank you. In terms of the umbrella term of cramped site layout, that would include the provision of the parking, the EV charging points, the yeah,
The safety of, you know, in introducing those things, as councillor Ellis has pointed out.
Just
They can't be, none of them, it can't adequately service the number of people occupying the site as it is, let alone.
And I think the terminology we have in the refusal reason about overdevelopment of the site and the cramped site layout would adequately cover that point.
Thank you. So, Dylan, I wonder if you could just say again the reasons for refusal for us, and then we'll move to a vote. Thank you.
The proposed development by reason of a cramped site layout and contrived internal layout would result in an overdevelopment of the site and poor living conditions for future occupants, contrary to retained policies D1 and D4 of the local plan 2002, policy TD1 of the local plan part 1 2018, and policy DM5 of the emerging local plan part 2.
Thank you very much. So we now have a proposal to refuse on those grounds. Would all those in favour of refusal please show? And those against? And any abstentions? So that is carried. And that is the end of the meeting at 8:15. Thank you.